Hey guys, for page 19, title your paper Solving Quadratic Equations by Taking Square Roots. And so in this particular one, we want to find the value of a variable that makes the statement true. And so we can do this by taking the square root of each side at some point in our solving. So with these first 6 examples that we're going to do, we will have either a one-step equation, two-step equation, multi-step equation, but we just have to remember in the end that we have to put a plus or minus anytime we take a square root. So in this first case, this is number 1, we've got x squared is equal to 32. So in order to get rid of that square, you guys know that you take the square root of both sides. And so we end up with a plus or minus the square root of 32. Please remember the square root of x squared is plus or minus x. Now 32 has is not a perfect square, but it does have a perfect square inside of it, which is 16. So I'm going to rewrite this as 16 times 2. And then I would take the square root of each of these numbers individually. The square root of 16 is 4, and the square root of 2 is still the square root of 2. It's not a nice number, so I'm going to leave it at that. Notice I moved the plus or minus to the opposite side, so I have that x is equal to plus or minus 4 root 2. So now for number 2, we've got m squared minus 18 equals 0. This is a one-step equation. You guys have been used to these. Technically a two-step, I guess, because of the number of steps that we have. But anyway, you're used to these, so I'm going to add 18 to both sides. And then from here, you're going to take the square root. We're just going to keep in mind that we're going to take the plus or minus version of that. So we've got plus or minus m is equal to the square root of 18. Now 18 again is not a perfect square either, so we're going to break that up into 9 and 2 because 9 is a perfect square. You'll take the square root of each of those, and when you do that, you end up with 3 root 2. And then we're going to carry over that plus or minus that came from the m. So final answer is m is equal to plus or minus 3 root 2. For number 3, if you want to take a minute and try to think about solving this, you might pause it and see if you can do it yourself first. First thing we're going to do is we're going to add 48, and then we're going to divide by 3. So we're left with x squared is equal to 16. Take the square root of both sides, and you end up with x is equal to plus or minus 4. Each of these you really should go back and check your answers by plugging these in. I should have said that from the very beginning. Anytime you are solving for a equation of any sort, you always want to plug it back into the original and just make sure you've got it correct. For number 4, oftentimes I have people want to FOIL this out and make that expand it like z minus 3 times z minus 3 and then FOIL. That's a really bad idea. It makes this problem actually very, very hard to do that. Because the z is inside the parentheses, we just want to start moving things now immediately, get everything out of the way. So the first thing that I'm going to move, I've got 3 things here, minus 3, a squared, and a 4. I need to move each of those. So the first thing I'm going to do is move the 4 first by dividing both sides by 4. After that, I've got a minus 3 and a 2. Well, the 2 is the one that I'm going to get rid of next. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. This is where I have to be careful because remember, I took the square root. Even though it's not just plain z, it doesn't matter. I took the square root of both sides. So technically, I was to put a plus or minus symbol right here. I went ahead and moved it to the other side because I'm running out of room, but this would have been plus or minus parentheses z minus 3 equals 5. And then I would have moved the plus or minus to the other side. So what I'm doing is actually solving 2 different equations. Z minus 3 equals 5 and z minus 3 equals negative 5. So once you solve for z on both of those, you end up with z equals 8 and z equals negative 2. I encourage you to plug both of those back in just to make sure that they're correct. For number 5, it's very similar to number 4. We've just got this extra minus 9 here. So now I have to get rid of a minus 2, a 3, a square, and a 9. You just got to make sure you do it in the same order. Again, do not FOIL at this point. You don't want to do that. So first thing we're going to do is add 9 and then divide by 3. Now I'm going to take the square root of both sides. I went ahead and moved the plus or minus to the right-hand side so I don't have to worry about it. And so now we're going to add 2 to both sides, and I'm left with x equal 2 plus or minus the square root of 7. And now number 6, I'm going to multiply both sides by 5 first. When I do that, I'm left with this, x minus 4 all squared equals 30. Take the square root of both sides. And so now for this one, square root of 30 doesn't have a perfect square at all. So, and 30 itself is not a perfect square either. So there's nothing I can do to simplify that. So all I'm going to do is add both sides by 4. And I'm going to have x equal to 4 plus or minus root 30. And that's my final answer.